The UN was established to ensure that the nations of the world would never again engage in another world war. As a neutral country, we are the second wave of Irish soldiers to be sent into the Congo.
Jesus fucking snake!
The compound is a joke. We're wide open.
They would never dare attack United Nations company.
You've never been in battle. Do you have a plan?
Just to pray there's no need for us.
Save us from peril and from
Attack!
of every ocean star.
I require your surrender. If you continue to attack, we will continue to respond.
You do realize that you are outnumbered by a factor of 20.
You're hanging us out to dry. We need reinforcements.
There are larger things here at play than you can possibly imagine.
I don't give a damn about the larger things.
Tell me what I'm supposed to do. We each have our part to play in history. Yours is happening right now.
They're coming!
Good evening, everybody. My name is Leo Quinlan from Moral Injury International. I'm based in Ireland. And tonight we're going to talk about moral injury with a very special guest, my friend and colleague, Marty O'Connor from Melbourne, Australia. Marty and I started this moral injury website with Michael Lyons and Wally Jensen about 4 years ago. But this is the first time that Marty and I will have this kind of conversation and have it recorded. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Just very, very briefly, what is moral injury, where did it come from, and how it affects us in moralinjuryinternational.com. Well, Marty and I have a connection insofar as both of our fathers fought in the siege of Jadotville in the Congo in 1961. And about 2021, we met up online simply because the term moral injury has surfaced. Marty and I discussed it. It rang a bell with us. Both of our fathers would have suffered moral injury to varying degrees, and then it went down through the families. And very, very quickly, what is moral injury? In the military sense, and I hasten to add that moral injury exists in all walks of life. It exists in the prison service, police service, public sector, and many, many other walks of life. But just for tonight, we'll just kick it off, talk about moral injury in the military sense. And very, very briefly, moral injury occurs when soldiers suffer some traumatic experience and are then betrayed by higher authority, by the bosses, in other words. And the side effects of moral injury, they're fairly well known for people who've watched our podcast, but for first timers, the effects of moral injury is silence. They don't talk about it. The survivors of whatever the incident was, they keep silent for years and years, maybe right up until death, or until something triggers them off to talk about it, a family bereavement or watching the film, in this case, of the Siege of Jadotville. They have trouble with interpersonal relationships, they have broken marriages, depression, alcoholism, and unfortunately, in some cases, suicide. And what is very important for you to consider or to remember when Marty is talking about it in a moment or so is the transgenerational effect, because this affects not just in the Jadotville situation, the veterans when they come home, but their children, and now down even into their grandchildren. So with that kind of a slightly long introduction, I'd like to kind of bring Marty on and let's see what Marty and hear what Marty has to say. Okay, Marty, are you there?
Oh, good morning, Leo.
Good evening and good morning. It's nighttime
Yes,
here in Ireland.
I'm in Melbourne
Yes.
here, so we're morning time, and thank you for doing the interview with me.
Okay, I've been waiting to get you in the hot seat for a while.
The tables are turned, huh?
Exactly. Marty, we know each other for about 4 years. I know a lot about you. I know a lot about your family. Uh, you know, so there's nothing you'll say tonight that would be, I imagine, will be new to me, but it's certainly going to be new to a lot of listeners and people who are watching this podcast. Um, I suppose the best way is for me just to remind people that in December 1961, a company of the 35th Battalion, 155 of them, all returned from the Congo. They came back, and initially they were hailed as heroes. There were civic receptions in every town and village that they came from. I remember the one in Athlone for my own dad and his troops when they came home.
Yeah.
And then about 6 or 8 months later, everything kind of died off and they were ignored, etc., etc. We won't go into the reasons why. It's kind of well known that it didn't suit the higher ups for Jadotville to get much publicity. But that's a different story, and that's not why we're here tonight, except that this denial of them, this ignoring of what they did, even though it's recognized worldwide as a great achievement, a military achievement, it began to fester, for the want of a better word, with the veterans. And then it had effects on them, and it had effects on their families. And you and I have been talking to lots of people over the last few years from Jadotville and children of Jadotville, and we know what has happened. Now, you're one of the children of Jadotville. You were born a few years after Jadotville, but now you probably know more Jadotville than most people. So if I can hand it over to you now to tell us what it was like when you were growing up, as much as you want to tell us, and the transgenerational effect, and I'll leave it to you to talk now.
Thank you, Leo. Yes, indeed. I was born on the beautiful Curragh Camp in County Kildare. I was born in the Army Military Hospital there in 1961. Grew up at a lovely there. Obviously, my dad wasn't. I didn't. I was after a Jadotville baby, as you said, and we had a great life. I loved, especially the people on the Curragh Camp. I loved the whole thing about the army, everything like that. But then to throw a little damper on it, in reality, is that when my dad came back, and my mom told me this later in life, but when he came back from Jadotville, he was a very damaged man. And I think every time he went overseas, it was replaying in his head. So there was a lot of violence, Leo, a lot of torture, hunger, starvation, marital rape within the family. There was a lot of that went on. And then as it went on, and then I understood what moral injury is, it gave me a whole new perspective. You know, my mom attempted murder, suicide on us children at least 6 times. And I use that word very lightly, at least 6 times. And God love her. But I go back to even us children, and we've used this word on the show before. There was no duty of care to the men that came back from Jadotville, first of all. And I've spoken to them. We've interviewed people. I know a lot of the family members. They were called cowards. They were disgraced for doing their job. But then what happens is, in moral injuries, when that happens to them, they come home and they basically bring war home. They go home and they take it out on the family. And then that runs through the generations of it.
Okay, Marty, can I, just for listeners and viewers, to say that they come home and take it out on the family. 155 came home. We know that 155 didn't suffer the same way. Some of them never took it out on their families. So we wouldn't want listeners to think that every single
No, 100% correct, Leon. As we say, we've spoken to a lot of people. Some take it a certain percentage of it might damage. They might just go silent. I'm not talking about the extremes of my story with violence. That I'm not trying to insinuate that the men did that, as you rightly pointed out. it's the fact that they suffered in different ways, as you've said.
Yeah.
They're like alcoholism, loneliness, suicide, mental homes. They are their own. But I look at from the transgenerational, and if you investigate how many wives took their own lives over it and still live with that, some of them, is that's where I'd be speaking, Leo, and from how it affected my family and myself.
Yeah. Okay. So without asking you to go into too many gory details or anything like that, you've kind of indicated very strongly that there was violence there and there was hunger. And I know from what you're saying, there were times that there was not much money to go around and so on and so on and so forth. Obviously, this had effect on you as a youngster growing up and your older and younger siblings. I don't know what you'd like to tell us about that. And as you came to adulthood and you went to Australia, how it might have affected you and continues to affect you and your siblings. If you want to tell me anything.
It does, Leo. Of course it does. It runs in, as I go back to what we're talking about, just the soldiers, but the transgenerational, whether it's the wives, which I believe the wives went through as much as the men in a different fashion, is that they suffered. And I only realized it when I met you and realized what moral injury was when I was doing my book. And I was able to, I mean, I spoke out about it, but speaking it out openly about it, that helps people. I look at my mother, and God love her, sure. Back then, like, the army was our life, you know, and you went by the army rules. She couldn't leave my dad. And sadly, he used that as an opportunity to put her down for the almost the violence, and then it portrayed on top of us, and we lived with that. But with saying that, I realize now that with my dad, he came back damaged. And Leo, I say this, and for your listeners, is that duty of care is not just to the person, whether it's a soldier or a police officer or a paramedic, it's to the families. And there was no duty of care. My dad should never have been sent home to us in the condition that he came back. And if I may throw in there, they didn't speak out, because back then, it's different nowadays, thank God, in a certain degree. But if they spoke out back then about having mental health issues, or they suffered any kind of stuff, they were straight away, you were kind of put, you stayed where you were. There was no chance of promotion or going overseas and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know. I've seen that myself in certain areas in the army. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that the transgenerational effect is there. You and I have interviewed people who are your age and even my age, and I'm a good bit older than you, because I see where a year after you were born, I joined the army in the Curragh. So you were running around in the Curragh for a couple of years while I was in the cadets and so on. So that just ages me, actually. But yeah, I have to remember that. But anyway, we've interviewed a few people, quite a few people, and we've spoken to them unofficially as well, not on camera. And we know that families are split up. Families of veterans who were your age and families of veterans who were my age, and they haven't spoken to each other for years and years because of the way their dad was when they came back. The silence, not so much violence, we didn't hear much about that, but certainly the silence factor, non-communicative, not able to give a hug to the children anymore, things like that. You know, and the transgenerational effect was always present. But just coming to something, Marty, since you've used it yourself, you know, you didn't have a high regard for your dad, but now since you've learned more about Jadotville and what he must have gone through in an armored car with bullets hitting the armored car all the time, and I know his armored car would have killed a lot of the enemy, and that had this effect on him, which you've been able to come to terms with the way he I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think you've said it before, that you now understand him, and there's a certain amount of closure coming
Well,
your way, or has come.
that's a very good double whammy question and answer at the same time. Is absolutely, Leo, is, and not just him, if I may include that everybody knows Matt Quinlan, who served there, a young chap, and he came to Australia, and I had permission to talk about this, and he came to Australia and ended up taking his own life years later, even though he lived a good life up to the age of 48. But going back to that, Leo, with my dad, is when I learned moral injury, but for some reason I stayed on with my dad 10 years after, unknowns to the family, once he was removed from the house for violence. We lived on the Curragh Camp till I was 17. That's all I knew. And then we moved to Naas after his 21 years service. And my mum believed things would get better, but they got worse. The violence was, and the older I got, the less I was willing to tolerate it. You know, as a youngster, I wouldn't say encouraged, I'd use probably your words a little gurrier. I would get them to, my dad, if he wanted to cause trouble with my mom or my siblings, I automatically, and it kind of built into my head, Leo, is I accepted beatings. And this sounds a crazy word. I've used the word I look forward to them, but I certainly didn't look forward to them. But what I mean by that is it's so much easier to take a beating, but you watch your mother or your siblings getting hurt and you can't do anything physically because your dad's older, and that's where moral injury comes in, because I loved my dad and I couldn't believe that he would do that to us. So it was a double whammy. And at the age of 5, I pulled my hair out. I'll flash a photograph up there, bold Marty. And all of us, all the family, I only speak for myself with the consultation with my family, but we all suffered badly. And my poor mother, I mean, with the suicide and what she went through and beatings, and she was a very religious woman. She was to be a nun, basically. That was her ambition. She did lie, Leo. She said she had sex with my dad once, but I'd proven that wrong. Okay. So that was kind of our life. But I think I can speak out for everyone, especially we all suffer from it in certain degrees. Some suffer more, some suffer less. But I've learned through moral injury. Yeah. That's why I moral injury is, I forgive my dad, which is a very unusual thing to say for someone that used to tie your hands behind your back and beat you, you know, or do other stuff. I'm not going to go on. Your listeners don't need to hear this in detail. So yes, Leo. So that's what I find on the subject is moral injury. That's where I found peace of mind, closure. And if I may throw in for anyone listening to it, when you go through moral injury, whether it's, you know, abuse against a child, whether you're the child, or it's abuse against a woman, or in these days, it can be male, female, whatever, you need to speak out, because the only thing that will happen is you blame yourself. And as a child, I blamed myself for what my dad, we all did, for what he was doing to her. So it was the kind of the norm to get beat up, or it was too normalized, which shouldn't have been the case.
Okay. Yeah. Now, not wanting you to bare your soul too much or anything, Marty, but you're a very good example of somebody who suffered from moral injury from quite a young age, and it's great that 2021 and since 2021 you've been able to identify it, come to understand it, come to terms with it. It's a healing process. You've said this to me before and so on, you know, but there are so many people that we have met that are in that same category over the last 4 years. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but do you agree with me that the common trend that has appeared is that once they identify that they have suffered moral injury, or somebody belonging to them suffers moral injury, all of a sudden for my favorite term, the penny drops.
Penny drops.
And all of a sudden they become to understand. And after a while, there's, as you've mentioned already, there's forgiveness, closure, understanding, and a bit more peace of mind.
I would agree
with
I would agree with you 100%. And if I can just go in, just my specific one is that it didn't just help me, it helped my siblings to understand. Whereas my dad wasn't recognized like that, but now he is. You know, I had 130 different family members and offsprings and their family members when I got presented with the Bon Jadotville by the Irish ambassador. That was an amazing time because it's got emotions. And as you know, I've marched in Anzac Day. And if I may indulge and walk down, and obviously with my mum, and I'm wearing the medals, and I look up, Leo, and there's all these 32,000 people waving Irish flags. And I'm walking down, I'm wearing the medals. I'm walking down, I looked up and I said to my dad, "What do you think?" He said, "Good man, Marty. You stole my license when you were 17. Now you're taking my medals." And I looked up at my mom and she said, "Good on you, Marty. But remember one thing," she said to me in my head, she said, "is you wear those medals for all of us because we all earned them."
That's a lovely way of putting it. That's a nice way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I wear them very proudly.
Yeah. Marty, okay, without going too much more into your particular situation, because I think everybody's got more or less the gist of what you want to say, would you like to say anything about other people that we have met, have suffered, not by name, instances? Like I will start off for listeners. You're not just an isolated case. There's another Jadotville veteran who tried to kill his children with a pistol, okay? And as you know, one of his daughters talks to us regularly, and that veteran in Jadotville was only 17 years of age, and he did a very brave thing and recommended for the highest medal award in the Irish Army, Military Medal for Gallantry. And his wife, whom I think is about 84 years old now, remember a few years ago, she told us about the experiences living with him, the beatings, etc., etc. And she said that to this day, she still loves him madly.
Yes.
You know, can you just imagine that? What she went through, and she still loves him madly. And it's almost like before moral injury ever was spoken about, she understood that, like your dad, the wrong man came home, but she could see the man she married. And even after he's dead and she's 84, she still has good thoughts about him. Isn't that a lovely way to end up rather than the opposite?
I think that's beautiful, and you triggered in my head there, Leo's. My mom did, and as you mentioned there, and for the listeners, my story in my book that comes out is called "They Sent the Wrong Man Home." And even though my mom's passed, she came up with that name because I asked her, "Why did you stay with him?" She said, "Marty, I loved him. I loved him in his army uniform. I loved everything about him, but they sent the wrong man home." She wanted to have a relationship, but he came back I used the word, he came back damaged, Leo.
He did. Yeah.
And answer your question with and the podcast is there with Geraldine, I have permission, and Elizabeth, is this, yes, they went through family life. I've spoken to a lot of others, I'm not going to mention names, but they suffered a lot. And going back to the transgenerational, there's a lot of family members out there that are suffering. And I'm talking about I'm fine. I've realized what it is, and I have no problem now because through moral injury. But the fact is, there's so many living out there now that, and I mean, I'm talking about the kids of and I'm sure the men as well, that there's just no closure for them. But I would recommend that anybody out there that's a family member, the best way to do it is to talk to each other about it, because everyone has going back to you, as you say, Moral Injury International, silence. The beer's not going to do it for you. That's not going to give you answers. Cigarettes are fine, but you can't live in silence.
Yeah. We always trigger things off in each other's minds, Marty. A couple of things that trigger off the silence bit. There's another Jadotville veteran whom I won't mention by name, but he was at a particular function there a few years ago in Ireland. He was a guest of honor at it, and his son, aged in his 50s, working in England, came to attend this function, and that was the first time he ever heard anything about his father and Jadotville. He knew his father was in Jadotville, but he didn't know anything about the details, nothing. Silence. The father never spoke about it, you know. The second thing that triggered off, came into my mind that we're talking about the Irish Army, but you know, and I know from discussions with the Australian Army, with the American Army, I do with the British Army, it's exactly the same in all the armies. Yes. Exactly the same. Yes. They suffer, they come home, they're forgotten about, no duty of care, moral injury sets in. And for listeners, moral injury is akin to post-traumatic stress, but different to the extent that it's more of an injury to the soul. Very hard to diagnose it. It's not very obvious, and it's an injury to soul, and people hide it inside all the time.
Well, I'm not qualified to say what it is, but I can just speak, and to your listeners, to speak is to say that once you understand moral injury, you don't feel isolated. And more importantly is, which I was alluding to earlier, is you don't feel guilt. So you can actually, once you understand what your past was, you can move forward. And moral injury explains that. Well, it certainly did it for me. And as I said, members, and I've spoken, I've done interviews with Australian police officers, Dallas police, psychiatrists, nurses, celebrities, and there's all one common thing. They all have a certain degree of moral injury once you understand it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's for you and I, it's been a kind of a roller coaster for the last 4 years in what we've learned about moral injury. And just again for listeners, I heard this from the U.S. Army War veterans over in Pennsylvania. And I think it was by January 2021, and around, I think it was a month or so after that, you and I started talking to each other, meeting each other like this. And, it's been a roller coaster. We've learned an awful lot. And that's why, while we're not absolute experts, and again, just for listeners, we're not putting ourselves out as being experts. What we're trying to do, and Marty and I talking tonight are trying to do, we're doing one mission only, that is to raise the awareness of moral injury so that somebody, listeners and watchers, viewers might say, that's me, or that was my father, or that's my brother, or something. They might recognize it in themselves or somebody else, and thereby might be able to get some help.
And not only that, Leo, I can point out to our listeners as well, is that we've started this in 2021. We don't take money for videos. They can be used anywhere for educational. We're not a non-profit. We are purely self-funded. So that's why when we speak to people, we want them to know that every time you speak out, you're actually helping someone else. I found, Leo, just off thing is, and you've done interviews, and how would you answer this one? I throw one back, is I found every person I've interviewed from, and a lot of authors too, which I've got up at the back, Ray Lane, Christy Fleming, Tracy Conley, Karina, Will, there's Sean Hempsey, but I find every time I talk to them and it goes into moral injury is that you find a new friend.
Yeah.
Like you tell your story, and as you said, there's one thing that drops them and go, oh, maybe my dad wasn't yeah. And so can you move forward on that? Or like yourself now, Leo, I'm throwing a little bit back at you. You know you won't get away with it too easy. Is like you said with your dad. Now, your dad had an amazing job, and I use these words, I've used them before, but I want to emphasize it. And for listeners all over the world, as you'll see, look on the film on the siege of Jadotville. Now, Leo's dad, in his own right, he's done in the army, and a great painter, may I say, is your dad had the responsibility of bringing home those 155 men, but by doing what he did and not using, he could have got them all to fight till they were all dead. And maybe some people would have liked that. He didn't. He brought them all back home. As we've spoke before, we've done our research, and including myself, I've given it a good share. And to my family, there's nearly 10,000 offsprings of those men.
That's right.
So I'm trying to go in, but I'm digging into is the man must have suffered a moral injury, and then with you even talking, you're a champion, but I know you're the most modest man I've ever met, and you actually there's a difference between you as an officer and everything you've done. You're actually exactly the same as your dad, as in, you actually care about the families. That's why you and me are talking. And I know what you've done so many things for the families.
Yeah, look, I think I've said it to you before. I have my dad on my right shoulder shouting in my ear, telling me what to do still, you know. Yeah, but anyway, look, it's a certain feeling of duty that we should be doing something for people, and not just Jadotville people, but because we're into this thing, for people in all walks of life. And for the listeners too, I suppose we have a kind of a figure. How many people do we reach? We reach something like 21 million people. Now, we like to emphasize, to be careful about it, we don't have 21 million followers. We reach 21 million people because when we put it up, you do all that, Marty, and that's the NASA space station that you're sitting in with all the along you, you know. When you put something, it bounces to the next one, and it goes to a lady in America who's got 6 million on her moral injury platform, and whatever this interview with you now will go to her. 6 million of her people will listen to it, and so that's how we have a wide reach around the world of almost 21 million people now.
And that's what I mean. We broadcast to 21 million people. And the thing is, what I'm saying, it's early, is all these family members, whether it's, as Leo just said there, it's not about just, we're talking about police, we're talking about in all walks of life, basically, is the best way to start, speak to a friend. If you think there's something wrong with someone, speak to a friend and just let them talk to you. Have a chat. You know, you don't have to, as we say, you don't have to go for a beer. You know, you can just go around and see them. But the more it spreads by people, and I go back to family, and especially because we're talking about army families and police and everything, but the army families, if I could just finish off with a message, Leo, is don't spread the word and be proud. And I am proud of my dad for what he was asked to do for his country without getting anything back for it other than a medal.
Well said, Marty. Listen, it's been a funny kind of I wasn't interviewing you so much as chatting with you, and we got your story, but we branched out in other things, just as things were triggering off each other, you know. Yeah. So I hope that our listeners and our viewers will have got something out of this. And I know that, as usual, you'll put up something, say how they can contact us if they want to, et cetera, et cetera. So from my point of view, Marty, I think we've kind of come to an end for this. Thanks very much indeed. And thanks for the last 4 years, by the way, of putting up with ideas that I've thrown your way. And thanks indeed for all the support. So leaving the last comment for yourself, Marty.
Now, all I can say is, Leo, thank you. Thank you to Michael Lyons and Dr. Wally Jensen, is because there's no one person could do this. And what the beauty part is, and I'd like to say this, our only thing that we ever came into this, and I know we reach all these people, we're self-funded, is the reason we do this because it's nice to help people and it's nice for people to tell their stories. And if you've got a story that they want to tell, go to moralinjuryinternational.com and send us a line, because there's so many stories out there. And as you're just saying, Leo, it's we're just talking about Jadotville because we're, sons of Jadotville and other families. But we were talking about, you have Afghanistan. Listen, there's so much going on in the world at the moment, in Gaza especially, and my heart goes out to the people in Gaza. And I hope that they'll be suffering moral injury, and those young children, when I look at those photographs, I'm not political, but I need to chuck that in there. It's shocking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leo.
Agreed. Okay, Marty, listen, thanks for that. And we'll talk again. So, as we do about 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So, Marty, thank you very, very much.
No.
I know that it might not have been that easy for you to say some of the things you did say, but much appreciated. And you take care of yourself. God bless.
Well, Leo, thank you very much. And it's not only that, some of the stuff you talk about, but it's lovely, as I keep going back to, is talk to a friend, and you are indeed a friend. You lend your ears, and we've spoken many times. So I'll just close it up here for you.
Okay.
And so, listen, there's lots of other stuff. And even if you want to know about Jadotville and other people that we've interviewed, if you go to moralinjuryinternational.com, as I repeat myself, and then you can, and we do life stories with Marty, musicians, everything like that. Anyone with a story, contact us. And Leo, it was a pleasure, my friend.
You take care of yourself, Marty. Okay?
Thank you, Leo.
God bless you.
Okay,
God bless.
cheerio. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.